March 1943 marked a turning point not just for the U.S. II Corps in North Africa, but for General George S. Patton himself. After his meteoric rise in transforming the disorganized American forces in Tunisia, Patton faced a scandal that threatened to end his career. On August 3, 1943, while the campaign in Sicily was underway, reports reached Eisenhower's headquarters that Patton had physically slapped 2 soldiers suffering from combat fatigue in a field hospital, an act that instantly became public knowledge within Allied command and, eventually, the press. The first slapping incident occurred at the field hospital in Nicosia, where Private Charles Kuhl, a young infantryman of the 1st Division, was accused by Patton of cowardice. Witnesses described Patton pacing the floor, his voice booming over the cries of wounded soldiers, stating, "A real soldier does not whimper in the face of death. Get back to your unit, you coward." In the moment, the gesture, slapping Kuhl, was meant as shock therapy in Patton's eyes, a brutal way to restore discipline and courage, but the ramifications were far-reaching. The second incident occurred a day later at a nearby field hospital, where Patton struck Private Paul Bennett, another soldier displaying signs of battle fatigue. Bennett later recounted, "He came in yelling, pointing fingers, and before I knew it, my face burned from the slap. He told me I was bringing shame to my country." Patton's intent, he later explained privately to his staff, was to demonstrate that fear and hesitation in battle could not be tolerated. Yet the method backfired publicly. News of the incident spread quickly among troops and eventually reached journalists embedded with the Allies. Within days, newspapers from London to New York carried the story of Patton's hospital slaps, and the world began questioning whether a general who could command tanks and armies could also control his temper and judgment. Eisenhower found himself in a precarious position. As Supreme Allied Commander, he recognized Patton's extraordinary abilities as a field commander, but also had to maintain the ethical and moral standards of the Army. On August 10, 1943, Eisenhower convened a meeting with senior Allied staff, including Omar Bradley, Walter Bedell Smith, and British liaison officers, to discuss Patton's future. Bradley, who had long respected Patton's tactical brilliance but feared his impulsive temperament, said quietly, "He can lead troops to victory, but could he lead without scandal? That remains uncertain." Eisenhower, weighing the political implications and the potential disruption to troop morale, ultimately relieved Patton of active command temporarily and reassigned him to a less visible position, while publicly reprimanding him. It was a stunning reversal for a man who had, only months prior, been celebrated for his 30-day transformation of the II Corps in Tunisia. Patton's personal reaction to the scandal was a mixture of frustration, disbelief, and defiance. In private letters to his wife Beatrice, he wrote, "I have spent decades learning war, and they will condemn me for shaking awake a few frightened boys. Discipline must exist, or all is lost." His tone reflected the belief that leadership sometimes require harsh, even unpopular measures to maintain effectiveness. At the same time, Patton recognized that public perception and political oversight were forces he could not control. This tension between military necessity and public accountability became a defining theme in the controversy that engulfed him throughout 1943. The incident also deeply affected morale among the troops under Patton's command. Some soldiers, particularly those who had witnessed his extraordinary ability to train and inspire men in combat, remained fiercely loyal, seeing the slaps as harsh but necessary discipline. Others were unsettled, questioning whether a man capable of brilliant maneuvers on the battlefield could simultaneously respect the vulnerability of soldiers suffering from the traumas of war. Diaries from the 1st Infantry Division recount whispered conversations about Patton's temper and genius, and soldiers seem to oscillate between awe and fear. The duality of admiration and uncertainty shaped perceptions of Patton among the rank and file in ways that would resonate for the remainder of the war. The media amplified the controversy, emphasizing moral outrage over strategic brilliance. Newspapers across the United States published editorials questioning whether Patton's aggression and temperament were suitable for an officer of his rank. Headlines such as "Patton's Fury," "Hero or Hazard?" appeared in major papers, prompting letters to the White House and the War Department from concerned citizens. The debate was no longer just military. It had become a national conversation about the ethics of command, the the human cost of war, and the balance between discipline and compassion. Political pressure mounted, with some officials suggesting that Patton's career should be ended to preserve public trust. Despite the scandal, Patton's reputation among Allied commanders remained complicated but intact. British generals like Bernard Montgomery viewed the situation with cautious interest, acknowledging Patton's operational genius while questioning his judgment. Montgomery reportedly said to a colleague, "He fights like a lion, but sometimes a lion is blinded by rage." Eisenhower's staff worked tirelessly to contain the fallout, while preserving Patton's effectiveness, eventually assigning him to planning roles before he returned to active combat leadership during the Sicily campaign. Patton's temporary sidelining became both a political necessity and a pause for reflection, allowing both the man and his superiors to recalibrate expectations. Meanwhile, German intelligence closely monitored the controversy. Intercepted communications indicate that Rommel and his command staff discussed the slapping incidents with a mixture of surprise and interest. They noted that a general whose troops were highly effective might now face internal disruption, potentially weakening Allied operational momentum in Sicily. Rommel wrote in a March 1943 intercepted report, "The Americans have energy and skill, but temper like this might fracture them at the wrong moment." This insight underscores how Patton's personal controversies had operational implications, as both allies and enemies recognized that leadership extended beyond tactics into psychology and perception. In Sicily, the timing of Patton's return to command was critical. The invasion of the island was underway, with U.S. and British forces executing amphibious landings in July 1943. Patton, though publicly admonished, retained influence over troop movements and strategic planning, often working through intermediaries to maintain operational efficiency. Field reports reveal that he used his knowledge of terrain, enemy dispositions, and combined arms tactics to advise subordinate commanders, all while remaining under close scrutiny from Eisenhower. His dual reality, revered as a strategist, condemned as a disciplinarian, added tension and urgency to every decision. Patton's reflections during this period were recorded in private diaries and letters, providing insight into the mind of a general navigating both public and operational crises. He often wrote about the paradox of leadership, the need for strict discipline to ensure battlefield success versus the ethical responsibility towards soldiers' well-being. He recorded his frustration that public perception sometimes overshadowed battlefield reality, noting, "Wars are won by men willing to act decisively. The world applauds sentiment over results at its peril." These entries reveal not just a personal struggle, but a timeless tension in military command, how to reconcile humanity with the harsh necessities of war. Even as the controversy swirled, Patton's operational abilities remained undiminished. Reports from August and September 1943 show that his strategies in Sicily, when implemented by subordinate commanders, led to rapid advances and successful engagements against German and Italian forces. Units trained under his previous direction performed with confidence and coordination, proving that while Patton's public image suffered, the army he had built in Tunisia and Sicily remained capable and formidable. Observers from both Allied and Axis perspectives noted that tactical brilliance could survive scandal, even if reputational damage lingered. The combination of public scrutiny, political oversight, and operational necessity created a complex web for Patton to navigate. Eisenhower, while constrained by public opinion, recognized that Patton's genius could not be discarded. His eventual return to frontline leadership required careful political balancing, strategic assignments, and careful framing to maintain the legitimacy of the Allied command. Patton's career teetered between jeopardy and salvation, depending on both his results on the battlefield and the perception of the public, media, and military hierarchy. By late 1943, Patton's career trajectory exemplified both the fragility and resilience of military leadership. The slapping incidents, while damaging, became a defining moment in his legacy. Soldiers who had trained under him continued to perform with efficiency, confidence, and audacity, demonstrating that the principles he instilled, discipline, preparation, and speed, were more enduring than public condemnation. In private, Patton reflected on the paradox, writing, "A man may stumble in judgment, but the men he shapes will carry forward victory." This period underscored that leadership encompasses both brilliance and fallibility, and that resilience in command requires navigating both battlefield challenges and human scrutiny. Finally, consider the questions this episode raises for modern viewers. Can brilliance and leadership survive personal scandal? How do public perception, ethics, and operational effectiveness interact in high-stakes environments? What lessons can be drawn about accountability, courage, and human judgment under pressure? How do leaders balance discipline with empathy, audacity with prudence? These reflections encourage the audience to engage, discuss, and explore both history and leadership in a deeper, humanized way, leaving them with enduring curiosity about the man behind the legend and the forces that shaped him. As the summer of 1943 progressed, Patton's reintegration into active command became increasingly urgent. The invasion of Sicily, Operation Husky, launched on July 9, 1943, presented the Allies with a crucial opportunity to strike at Axis forces in the Mediterranean. Patton, though still under public scrutiny for his hospital incidents, assumed command of the U.S. 7th Army, working in coordination with British forces under General Bernard Montgomery. His return to frontline influence was met with skepticism by some, but those who had served under him in North Africa knew the magnitude of his tactical genius. Patton immediately focused on aggressive maneuvering, insisting that speed, deception, and audacity would define the campaign. His famous words, delivered to senior officers during the pre-invasion briefing, were blunt and resolute. "The Germans have taught us the cost of hesitation. We will act, strike, and overwhelm. Nothing else will suffice." Patton's strategy in Sicily emphasized mobility and psychological dominance over raw firepower alone. By mid-July, his forces had begun rapidly advancing inland from the beaches at Gela and Licata. The 7th Army utilized combined arms tactics perfected in Tunisia, armored columns spearheaded advances, supported by mechanized infantry, while artillery units delivered precise, coordinated barrages. Reconnaissance units scouted enemy positions continuously, transmitting intelligence that allowed for adaptive maneuvers. In letters to his wife, Patton described these operations with intense detail, noting that every hilltop, road junction, and river crossing could be decisive. He wrote, "War is a chessboard of men, terrain, and timing. Every square must be secured before the enemy can react." The emphasis on constant, disciplined forward movement exemplified the very methods that had made him feared by Rommel in North Africa. By late July, the 7th Corps faced the formidable terrain of the Sicilian mountains, a challenge that required not only tactical skill, but leadership capable of inspiring exhausted soldiers. Patton personally visited frontline units, often under fire, reinforcing both discipline and morale. Soldiers described him walking along ravines, gesturing sharply and speaking in booming tones. "Courage is contagious. Hesitation spreads like disease. We are Americans. Fear is not our inheritance." His insistence on personal presence in dangerous areas was both symbolic and practical. He wanted officers and men alike to feel the immediacy of command. Diary entries from the 1st Infantry Division recall moments where his guidance turned potential retreats into decisive advances, instilling a sense of inevitability in their actions. The tactical challenges of Sicily extended beyond terrain to include German and Italian defensive ingenuity. Panzer divisions, entrenched along hilltops and fortified towns, attempted to delay American advances. Patton's response combined rapid maneuvering with feints and encirclements, forcing the defenders to overextend. His ability to anticipate enemy reactions was central. He studied intercepted communications and prisoner interrogations to predict counterattacks. Field reports from July 25th describe a situation near Troina where Patton's use of flanking armor and artillery coordination outmaneuvered German forces, compelling them to retreat. These operations demonstrated that even under immense pressure, Patton's strategic thinking remained precise and adaptive. During this period, his relationships with subordinate officers continued to shape the campaign's effectiveness. Patton's direct style, often described as abrasive, nonetheless fostered accountability. Officers knew that any hesitation would be questioned, and that decisive action was rewarded with both recognition and trust. Lieutenant Colonel William H. Rupertus, who served under Patton in Sicily, noted in his journal, "He demands perfection, but it is not cruelty. It is clarity. Every officer knows what is expected, and that knowledge is power." This philosophy created a culture of responsibility that amplified the effectiveness of units, even under the stress of combat. Patton's presence was also felt in the realm of inter-allied coordination. Collaboration with British forces under Montgomery required delicate diplomacy. While Montgomery favored meticulous planning and consolidation, Patton prioritized speed and aggressive action. Staff officers described tense meetings where Patton's blunt assessments clashed with Montgomery's cautious approach. One memo from August 3, 1943, quotes Patton, "Fortune favors the bold, not the careful. Hesitation invites destruction." Despite friction, both generals recognized the value in each other's approach, and operational outcomes in Sicily reflected a pragmatic blend of caution and audacity. The media, meanwhile, remained fixated on Patton's prior scandals. Reporters in Sicily noted his energetic presence and rapid advances, often contrasting his battlefield brilliance with his controversial temper. Newspaper dispatches highlighted both the audacity of his movements and the lingering question of whether his style could be controlled. One correspondent wrote on July 30th, 1943, "Patton moves like a force of nature, unpredictable, unstoppable, yet teetering on the edge of chaos." These accounts, while sometimes critical, amplified the mythos surrounding Patton and fueled public curiosity about his leadership and personality. Medical and support services in Sicily were a particular focus for Patton. He emphasized the importance of maintaining supply lines, ensuring wounded soldiers received prompt care, and reinforcing the resilience of his units. Reports from August 1st detail his inspections of field hospitals, where he conversed with nurses, medics, and patients alike, reinforcing the notion that every element of the Army contributed to combat effectiveness. Patton's holistic approach to operations, integrating logistics, morale, and frontline strategy, ensured that the Army could sustain momentum even in harsh conditions. By early August, the capture of key Sicilian towns, such as Troina and Randazzo, highlighted the success of Patton's methods. His forces executed rapid advances, cutting off German supply lines and capturing prisoners. Field dispatches indicate that German officers were increasingly frustrated by the relentless pace and unpredictability of American maneuvers. Intercepted communications from General Hans Valentin Hube indicated, "The Americans strike where we expect them least. Their leader moves as if the desert itself guides him." Patton's combination of psychological pressure, operational speed, and tactical innovation was beginning to take a visible toll on Axis forces. Despite operational success, Patton continued to face scrutiny from Eisenhower and Allied command. The slapping incidents remained a lingering concern, with political advisors closely monitoring public reaction. Internal memos reveal that Eisenhower balanced appreciation for Patton's battlefield effectiveness with caution regarding public perception. Patton, aware of this, often reflected privately that leadership required navigating both operational challenges and human scrutiny. A general must win battles and hearts, but the world rarely judges the same way as the battlefield, he noted in a diary entry dated August 5, 1943. The integration of combined arms in Sicily reached new heights under Patton's direction. Coordinated attacks involving infantry, armor, artillery, and air support allowed for rapid advances that overwhelmed entrenched positions. Soldiers reported that exercises and rehearsals conducted in Tunisia had prepared them for the unpredictability of Sicilian terrain. Patton's insistence on repeated drills, strict discipline, and psychological preparedness paid dividends as units moved through narrow passes, defended hills, and fortified towns with remarkable coordination. "We move as one," wrote a staff officer on August 7th, each man knowing the part he plays, yet feeling the force of the whole. As August progressed, Patton's legend grew both among his soldiers and Allied intelligence. He was a general who could inspire audacity, anticipate enemy movements, and integrate diverse units into cohesive actions. German reports acknowledged the danger of his unpredictability, while American officers marveled at his energy and relentless attention to detail. Even under the shadow of scandal, his operational genius continued to manifest in measurable victories. Finally, the closing days of August 1943 left questions hanging in the minds of both observers and soldiers. Could Patton reconcile the tension between public perception and battlefield necessity? How did his audacity, brilliance, and temperament shape the outcome of Sicily? What lessons about leadership, courage, and responsibility could be learned from a man whose genius bordered on recklessness? These questions, unspoken yet palpable, created engagement and reflection, inviting the audience to consider not just the events of 1943, but the human complexity behind the war. As September 1943 dawned, Patton's role in Sicily evolved from a controversial figure to a pivotal operational leader, despite lingering public scrutiny over the hospital incidents. The campaign was reaching its critical stage, with Axis forces retreating toward Messina, the northern tip of Sicily, in an effort to evacuate to the Italian mainland. Patton, fully aware of both the strategic and symbolic significance of capturing Messina first, pushed his 7th Army with relentless pressure. Field reports from September 4th noted armored columns advancing through rough mountain passes, infantry navigating jagged ridges, and artillery units coordinating barges with precision that rivaled any European army of the era. Soldiers described the air buzzing with the whine of tanks, the rumble of artillery, and Patton's own booming commands as he moved between units, inspecting positions and directing movements in real time. Patton's aggressive pursuit created both operational and psychological impact on German and Italian forces. Intercepted communications revealed growing confusion among Axis commanders. General Hube noted that American forces were moving with a determination and speed that erases the advantage of fortified positions. Italian officers reportedly whispered among themselves, fearful that retreat routes would be cut off entirely. Patton understood that war was as much about perception as firepower. He sought to pressure the enemy into mistakes, using speed and audacity to create panic, a method he had perfected during Tunisia. His diaries from September 5th reveal that he was calculating every maneuver, stating, "The enemy fears momentum. We must strike as if every moment is decisive, for in war, hesitation is annihilation." Despite intense battlefield focus, Patton maintained his characteristic engagement with subordinate commanders and soldiers. He continued personal inspections, often walking through exposed positions under fire, speaking directly to men and officers alike. "Courage," he told a company commander near Troina, "is a habit, not a gift. It is made here in sweat and fear and persistence." Soldiers later recounted that these moments were transformative. Even in the chaos of retreating enemy forces, the presence of their general inspired confidence, unity, and audacity. Letters home reflected admiration for his leadership, even as the public debated his temper and past controversies. Tactical ingenuity was on full display as Patton coordinated multi-pronged assaults toward Messina. Reconnaissance units scouted mountain passes, allowing armored units to advance along routes previously deemed impassable. Infantry, trained under Patton's methods, executed flanking movements and infiltration tactics, often catching German defenders off guard. One notable engagement on September 10th saw a combined arms maneuver that encircled elements of the Hermann Göring Division, forcing surrender without a prolonged firefight. Patton's focus on speed, coordination, and psychological pressure had reached its zenith, demonstrating the culmination of the methods he had instilled over months of disciplined preparation. The challenge of inter-allied coordination continued, particularly with British forces advancing along parallel axes. Patton and Montgomery engaged in a careful, sometimes tense, negotiation of priorities and routes. Staff officers described briefings where Patton's blunt style clashed with Montgomery's methodical approach, yet both recognized the necessity of collaboration. On September 12th, Montgomery's deputy noted, "Patton moves like a storm. Our caution tempers his fury, yet both are necessary to win Sicily." This delicate balance highlighted the human dimension of leadership in coalition warfare, managing personalities as much as forces. Casualties and medical logistics remained a critical concern. Patton personally inspected field hospitals, medics, and casualty evacuation routes, ensuring that wounded soldiers received timely care. Reports indicate that the speed of medical support under Patton's direction allowed frontline units to maintain momentum, reducing disruptions caused by injuries. Letters from medics at the front describe a general who seemed obsessed not only with movement and strategy, but also with the lives of the soldiers under his command. His insistence on coordination extended from tanks and artillery to the tiniest details of field medicine, demonstrating a holistic approach to warfare. German forces, under mounting pressure, attempted counterattacks, but Patton's preparation and rapid response neutralized them. Detailed after-action reports reveal that American units often anticipated movements through intelligence gathering, area reconnaissance, and Patton's insistence on aggressive patrolling. When elements of the 15th Panzer Division attempted to retake high ground near Randazzo, they were met with coordinated armor and artillery fire, forcing a retreat. Patton's strategy combined relentless forward pressure with exploitation of enemy weaknesses, demonstrating a command style that merged operational brilliance with psychological dominance. Throughout the campaign, Patton continued to grapple privately with his public image. Diaries and letters reveal frustration at how his tactical genius was overshadowed by personal controversy. On September 15th, he wrote to Beatrice, "The men perform as never before, yet the world measures a general by headlines, not victories. Courage on the battlefield is rarely measured in print." This tension between perception and performance became a defining element of his leadership, shaping both his interactions with superiors and his approach to command. By mid-September, Patton's forces had successfully isolated Messina, and the city fell to Allied control on September 17, 1943. The strategic victory opened the gateway to the Italian mainland and solidified Patton's reputation as a formidable tactician. Field dispatches highlighted the speed of American advances, the coordination of infantry, armor, and artillery, and the effectiveness of psychological pressure against retreating Axis forces. Despite prior doubts and public scandal, Patton had demonstrated that operational brilliance could withstand personal controversy, provided leadership remained disciplined and decisive. The human cost of victory remained profound. Soldiers who fought under Patton were exhausted, yet morale remained high due to their trust in his leadership. Letters home describe a mix of awe, fear, and respect for a general who demanded absolute performance yet inspired loyalty. German and Italian prisoners reported similar impressions, noting the relentless pace and audacity of U.S. forces. Patton's presence, energy, and decisiveness left lasting impressions on all participants, demonstrating that the measure of a commander extends beyond strategy into the human dimensions of war. As the campaign concluded, Patton faced the dual realities of acclaim and scrutiny. Eisenhower praised the operational success, but remained cautious about future public relations. Patton's colleagues recognized his tactical genius, while acknowledging the difficulties posed by his temperament. The narrative surrounding him became a study in contrasts: a brilliant strategist, a harsh disciplinarian, a controversial public figure, an indispensable asset to the Allied war effort. Reflecting on Sicily, historians note that the campaign exemplified Patton's ability to combine speed, coordination, psychological insight, and personal engagement into a coherent operational strategy. The lessons for leadership, accountability, and audacity were vividly illustrated, offering insights not only into wartime command, but also into human behavior under pressure. Every maneuver, every decision, and every interaction reinforced the principle that leadership is as much about human psychology as tactical acumen. In the final analysis, Patton's near fall from grace and subsequent redemption during the Sicilian campaign demonstrate the resilience of effective leadership. Even in the face of scandal, operational brilliance can prevail, provided a commander leverages discipline, preparation, and human insight. The story of 1943 serves as a compelling case study in the intertwining of reputation, ethics, and battlefield effectiveness, highlighting the complexity of leadership under extraordinary conditions. Finally, consider these questions. How does a leader recover from public scandal while remaining effective in combat? What balance of audacity, discipline, and empathy ensures success in high-stakes situations? How do history and perception shape the legacy of military figures? And ultimately, what can we learn about courage, resilience, and accountability from a man who nearly lost everything yet proved indispensable to the Allied victory? These reflections encourage viewers to engage deeply, discuss possibilities, and connect personally with the human dimensions of leadership in war.